You are tuned in to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. Join us now on another exciting metaphysical journey. Relax, tune in, drop out, and take a seat by the fire as we explore new realms and possibilities. This is Magenta Pixie. You can find me at magentapixie.weebly.com. But now, here is Zany Mystic and guest. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. I'm your host, Lance White. Tonight, my guest is Scott Stevens. Scott is an award-winning television weatherman who, a decade ago, began investigating the claims of Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden that North America was being subjected to full-time weather modification. During the course of that personal investigation, he was the first to discover the primary reason for the now global chemtrail phenomena. During Scott's two-decade television career, he worked in Topeka, Kansas, Omaha, Nebraska, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Albany, New York, and Pocatello, Idaho. Scott now hosts a weekly radio program, Amerika Now, 8 p.m. to midnight on Saturdays, with the Genesis Communication Network at www.radioamerikanow, that's with a K, America.com. He's graciously ignoring his own radio show so he could be with us here at BBS. He is also a principal with Blue Water Alchemy and the Global Project to bring about a shift of human consciousness in concert with events surrounding 2012. You should, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. Let's get Scott on the show now before the hour's up. Hi, Scott. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, buddy. Hanging in there.
I'm hanging in there, too. It's been a strange spring equinox day. Not what I expected at all. What about you?
Well, I think all of these days are a little bit odd anymore. There's just a whole lot of energy pouring into this planet, and I think some of us just don't quite know what to do with it.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yep. I agree with you on that one. Before we get started, I wanted to tell everybody that's listening either now or in the future or in some distant past to go to your website, which is www.weatherwars.info, and be sure to watch the videos, at least these two videos. Chemtrails Part 1 and Chemtrails Part 2 is especially good. I think that you've got the most comprehensive chemtrail site, Weather Wars site, and professionally done on the Internet.
You know, Lance, that was the whole reason I started the site, is that when I became aware of chemtrails, it was probably 1999 and 2000, when in perusing some of the alternative web news sites, occasionally a story related to something called chemtrails would show up. You know, and you know, I'm a pretty open-minded guy, and so I would follow those links on Rents or what really happened, these kind of things, and would kind of drill into the chemtrail story, and then pop off to Berry and Blues or Chemtrail Central or Clifford Carnicom's great site, carnicom.com, and you know, kind of begin to do some researching. And I guess initially it was Rents.com and that particular site that was kind of the clearinghouse for the information. But Lance, I didn't like how a lot of the articles were written. They didn't know cloud types. They didn't understand how contrail was formed, and they were coining new words like chem clouds and blah. You know, it was just blah 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 blah.
Oh yeah.
And so I thought, well, you know, if you don't understand basic meteorology, how are you going to convince anybody that knows something about meteorology that this phenomena is something abnormal?
Yeah, yeah.
And so for a couple of years, I honestly, you know, kept both hands, you know, extended out in front of me, and I kept this topic at a distance. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. However, it doesn't mean I didn't start paying a little closer attention to the skies. And as you read in the intro, I was primarily concerned with the work of Lieutenant Colonel Bearden, and in his his works about energetics and free energy, because to me it was apparent a decade ago that this world was facing an energy crisis that was artificially created. Since there are so many solutions to our energy problems just sitting out there waiting to be deployed. And that's what I was interested in. That's what I was originally researching when I stumbled onto Colonel Bearden's site, and one of the sidebars was Soviet weather engineering over North America. That had my attention. And that happened right after 2001. And so, after 9/11 happened, there wasn't a conspiracy that I wasn't going to be a little bit interested in. Because it was just obvious that the man behind the curtain had just pulled a big fast one on the world. And didn't want to be seen. And so I'm like, well, if you don't want to be seen, by God, I'm going to go looking. And
good for you.
Well, so, I dug into energetics, and I dug into SCADA weaponry, and Colonel Bearden had enough interesting cloud pictures on his site that I spent $110 and bought my first little Olympus digital camera. And that changed how I looked at the sky in 2001. And I began to, as we know with digital cameras, you can very cheaply document, picture, not a problem. And so I began to do a lot more photography of the skies. And over that 3 years between 2001 and 2004, I became utterly convinced that there was something amiss in the skies. And that didn't even bring in the chemtrails. There was enough weird things going on in the sky. There were enough odd shapes, and I began purchasing, high-resolution satellite imagery. Because what you find on the National, because the stuff the National Weather Service feeds you and the stuff you get on TV is crap. It's crap imagery. You can't watch an evening news now and get a good satellite picture. They're all cartooned out. And so, they're wiping the science out of meteorology. And the people, they still take it. So I was, looking at this high-resolution satellite imagery and started seeing waves and grids and patterns in the skies that I'm like, this is not supposed to be here. This clouds cannot look like this.
Right.
And I mean,
they don't. I learned about cumulus clouds and cirrus clouds in school, but they don't make tic-tac-toe formations.
Well, not typically. In cirrus clouds, your grandparents in the 30s and 40s, they were called mare's tails. Just long, straight clouds with a gentle wisp or gentle curl at the end. That's not at all what they look like now. They are squared. Almost every cirrus cloud will have a series of 90-degree bends and twists in them, and that's not natural.
No.
So as I became utterly convinced on June 6, 2004, that the entire planet's weather was manhandled to some degree, I was okay with weather modification. It was on that date in June of 2004 that I kind of had my realization, and my stomach sunk deep into my gut as I realized that I, as a weatherman, was not capable of forecasting the weather anymore because I was not forecasting the natural processes of the planet, where I was trying to forecast the intent of some organization that had control of the weather. And that was a huge paradigm shift for me, and I still had no idea where the chemtrails were in all of this.
Now, while you were a news anchor, did you notice from the images that you got in the TV newsrooms that there was something wrong or something different that wasn't being shown? And were you told not to investigate, or were you hampered in any way in saying anything about it?
The answer to both of those questions is no. Nobody told me not to say anything. And the data that I was getting from our weather, WSI, it's Weather Services International. It's a company that the stations that I've worked for would purchase our weather data from to go into the weather graphics systems and so forth and so on. The data was good, but I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what to look for. It's like discovering a story in the snow on your analog TV. It's like, oh my goodness, there's a story in there. There's a pattern to this snow, And that's really what I discovered, is that there's a pattern to what appears to be chaos.
Uh-huh.
And what this is where the chemtrails show up. So after I'd come to the realization that they were using directed energy weapons and acoustic and all of their portfolio and HARP and so forth to play with the weather, what I ended up doing at the end of 2004 was buying some webcams. I bought 4 cameras, and I bought 2 computers, and I bought some time-lapsing software.
Oh.
So I then set these cameras up around the house, and then started taking pictures every 4, 5, 6 seconds. And then at the end of the day, I'd get home from the late news, download the pictures and assemble a time-lapse AVI. And what I wanted to do was see if there was something odd in the behavior of the clouds that I could use to make a better forecast, so I wouldn't be pissing off my viewers when I got a forecast wrong. And so in the middle of April 2005, there was a series of aircraft flights that gave me my aha moment. And out looking out of one of my southwest upstairs bedroom windows, in about 30 minutes time, there were, I believe, 12 flights of trails. None of them persisted. But there was an undeniable pattern that there was something at that particular spot in the sky that these planes were interested. And that pattern of flights was never duplicated. I'd never seen it before, and I never saw it again. But what there was as one trail would be left behind, the trail segments of it would last or persist. And then another plane would come along from, more often than not, a 90-degree angle and precisely bisect that remaining chemtrail or trail. So I thought, okay, these planes are up there leaving markers in the sky.
Right.
And these markers are flowing with the wind. And other planes are coming along and marking off the end of those trails or bisecting those trails, or there are gaps in the trails and they'll fly a tangent or a diagonal flight through it. So those trails were up there, depending on the chemistry or the chemical mixture of the trails, will fluoresce under different atmospheric or meteorological conditions. And yeah. So let's take this another step, Lance.
Okay.
You've had a ridiculous amount of chemtrails out in California over the last 3-4 days, right? Okay. Because I'll see them on the satellite imagery, and I get my satellite imagery not from the National Weather Service, which as a rule sucks, but from weathertap.com. And weathertap.com will charge you $8 a month to access their database, but it's invaluable if you're doing this kind of research. And so what they do is they leave metallic nanoparticles in the sky. And because they are metallic and because they are salt-based, what happens when you add, all right, let's take this back to the home kitchen. What's the one thing you're told not to put in the microwave?
Metal.
Bingo. Bingo. So when the metal goes in the microwave, you spark, and it absorbs that energy much, much quicker than, say, bread or water.
Yeah,
so when we put these metal particles in the sky and apply electromagnetic energy into them, they're going to warm up.
Right.
And so what's been happening is they have been warming the atmosphere off of California this week. And when you warm the atmosphere, it expands. And when the atmosphere expands, it becomes a bubble of high pressure. That bubble of high pressure is then capable of diverting storms around it. So that next inbound storm is going to be weaker, not because the particles necessarily in the sky, but because that area of high pressure has been accentuated artificially. And so then that inbound storm will likely not create rainfall in California, but will be, even in a weakened state, be shunted north to Oregon or Washington or British Columbia. Or the other option is like putting a rock in a stream. It goes under that bubble of high pressure into the Baja, region of California. And then once that energy's dropped that far south, then it